Welcome to LifeBlood. This is George G, and the time is right. Welcome to today's guest, strong and powerful Michelle Slater. Michelle, are you ready to do this?
I am ready, George.
All right, let's go. Michelle struggled with Lyme disease for years. It suffered so greatly, she actually considered assisted suicide. In her last ditch effort, she traveled to Siberia to work with the world's leading dry fasting expert. Her newest book is Starving to Heal in Siberia. Michelle, excited to have you on. Tell us a little bit about your personal life, some more about your journey, and I guess what motivated you to write the book and what you're hoping people get out of it.
Thank you for having me, George. I appreciate being on the show. And yes, I'm very excited that the Starving Deal has just come out yesterday. And it's been quite the journey because I never intended to write a memoir or self-help book on recovering from Lyme because I was a healthy person who had a full life and I was very productive before I got sick. So I was a university professor and I ran marathons, I skied, and I went hiking all over the world, and then I went from that to just lying flat in my bed. And after being there for some years with what became late stage Lyme disease, when I recovered, and I know we'll talk about that, I wrote the book because I had been in such a state of despair to the point that I had been on the verge of committing assisted suicide. And when I learned of this radical methodology and thought, well, I really don't want to commit suicide, but this body is no longer inhabitable. So I tried it. And when it led to my complete recovery, I thought, I cannot keep this to myself. It's radical. People may not understand it, but I have to write a book about it so that I could possibly help as many people as I could who are suffering from not only late stage Lyme or Lyme, but also chronic fatigue, mystery illnesses, autoimmune disorders. And there are a lot of them out there, George. So I thought I have a moral obligation to write this book.
I that totally makes sense. I was going to say I identify with that, but that's not possible. So that certainly makes sense. I remember hearing about Lyme disease for the first time, I think in 2001 or two. It was somebody that I'd met through business, and their wife had been struggling with it for a really long time. And now you hear about it, and it's a terrifying disease because it seems like it's always just it just people don't can't diagnose it.
That's exactly right. It is terrifying for multiple reasons. Diagnosing it is difficult. There is the classic bullseye rash
Yeah.
that the CDC says 70% of people get it, but the truth is that so many people don't get it, and the ticks are so microscopic, and and so I didn't get the classic bullseye rash, and so yes, and then the testing itself is so sensitive that some people test negative but they're positive. So it depends on the test that you take. And then they call it the great imitator because there are so many symptoms that it can mimic other diseases. So it's hard to actually diagnose the Lyme itself. So it does become, and then by that point, if you haven't diagnosed it, it's become chronic, and then it becomes even more difficult to eradicate. So it is a very challenging disease. And unfortunately, there are more and more people getting it every year. I think about 440,000 people per year contract Lyme disease.
Um, so it is, wow, a super sneaky, efficient illness.
It
And
is.
is it an autoimmune disease? Or what is Lyme disease?
So it itself is, a vector-borne disease. It is not considered to be an autoimmune disease in itself. However, because it weakens the immune system and the body is constantly fighting it off, and these spirochetes that embed into the body are egregious, so it leads to a compromised immune system. So in addition to having the Lyme disease, I actually developed an autoimmune disorder, and that is very typical for patients with chronic Lyme, late stage Lyme. So the Lyme led to an autoimmune disorder. In my case, it was psoriasis, which is one of the known disorders. So I then had to combat that as well. But my treatments cleared all of that up, to my astonishment. So I have no trace of an autoimmune disorder. I have no trace of Lyme disease, and I have not for 5 years.
Amazing. So you mentioned that you were essentially bedridden. Um, I'm sure horrible pain and discomfort. Does it eventually kill people?
Many people, it's controversial about what the death is actually coming from, but there are many people who die from complications of Lyme. There are also, it's the Journal of Neuropsychiatric Disorders reported recently that about 1,200 patients commit suicide a year because of these
Hmm.
inflammation-inducing cytokines that cause depression in Lyme patients. And then there are major complications from Lyme disease. So yes, it absolutely does. I my joint pain was so severe that I couldn't put my hands around a steering wheel, to say nothing of even picking up a book. I wasn't able to read. I had severe migraines. I'd never had a history of headaches before. I had such memory issues. I would begin a sentence and I had no idea
Oh my
what I
God.
was talking about. I couldn't finish the sentence. Um, and just, and then other symptoms, tinnitus, tachycardia, night sweats. I couldn't really walk very well. Sometimes I would slide down on my bottom from my bedroom to get to the kitchen, and then I would be so tired I would just lie in a heap at the bottom of the stairs until I could get to the kitchen. So it was not a sustainable life, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who have that experience.
And so you're Googling or trying to figure out what can I do, and you learn about this program in Siberia.
Yes, and I had employed all of my tools. I have a PhD from Johns Hopkins. I'm a trained researcher. This whole experience for years, I had been researching, as a sick person who didn't really have, the wherewithal to conduct proper research. I would try everything that I could try. So this wasn't the first thing I had tried. I had exhausted a whole variety of modalities from allopathic to alternative medicine. So yes, on that day, which I will never forget, I can remember what I was wearing, what it looked like, the time of day, where the pillows were positioned um, in my bed around me, and I came across, yes, this interesting phrase and a forum for patients with autoimmune disorders. And it talked about the work of this Dr. Filonov in Siberia, an MD, who said that, the cells in the body can turn into like thermonuclear reactors and incinerate diseased cells.
Mm.
And somehow that seemed logical to me.
Sure.
And just like I incinerate diseased cells was like, yes, this is what we need to do. It might be magical realism, but let's find this doctor. So then I went on a quest to find the doctor and go to Siberia.
It's like literally it's like the hero's journey. You're venturing out into the unknown to meet the figurative Yoda out in Siberia. What is this human being doing in Siberia?
That's precisely right. It is the hero's journey, George. So he's from Siberia.
Huh.
He comes from a family of medical doctors in a part of Siberia that, it doesn't look like tundra. It's in a very beautiful part, UNESCO protected part in the mountains. It's a luscious landscape with beautiful rivers and mountains, songbirds, the tall pines. So it's this very peaceful sanctuary like setting, and this happens to be where he is from, and he believes that it's a favorable condition for the patient to be in nature, away from the city, while conducting these dry fasts. So he has a rustic clinic there. So that's his place, and
Amazing.
that it's conducive to healing.
Was it hard for you to go there? I mean, just with I don't have any idea if an American can just go to Siberia.
Yes. Well, at this time, unfortunately, circumstances don't permit that, but he does conduct fasts in Western Europe and in Turkey, where everyone seems to be able to go. I did have to renew a Russian visa that I already had, and my partner at the time had to literally pick up my body from my bed and sort of haul me to Siberia, which involved several flights and a long car ride, and then even navigating some backcountry roads to arrive there. Once I arrived, it felt like I was in the scene of some fairy tale with the doctor is right, wife is running through this sort of field calling my name, and I was like, I have arrived.
Amazing.
So yes, it was not easy to get there.
And so I don't even know what dry fasting is.
A lot of people don't. It's the primary question. So dry fasting means to abstain from all substances, including water.
Mm.
So absolutely nothing is ingested during a dry fast. And actually, one does not even take a shower, brush one's teeth, apply lotions or creams, because all of that could provide an external power supply to provide nutrients for the body. So I call it a practice that's similar to marathon training. So you work the body up to being able to undergo extended dry fasts. And I like to say right away that no one should try this at home today, feeling miserable in bed and saying, well, I'm going for it. This is not how it's done. Dr. Filonov is on drfilonov.net. He does Zoom consultations with people all over the world with a translator now, really largely thanks to me coming as the first American patient and then writing a blog. And all of a sudden there was a flood of people, and he organized and now does Zoom consultations with a translator. But the dry fasting itself, the body has this as a known process. It's an ancient practice. So the body knows what to do. It sort of becomes its own doctor and goes into this sophisticated process of recycling compromised cells and renewing, blood cells and recycling cellular debris.
What was your, just sort of in general terms, what was your diet like before going there?
So that's an excellent question because, as I said, one doesn't just simply dry fast. Dr. Filonov likes to have 3 months to prepare a patient. So my diet was already very clean. I've always had a very clean diet. So, organic vegetables, very plant-based. But I reduced portions, absolutely, no sugar. I never was, I had long known that, white bread, etc. was a no-no. So it was very, healthy, plant-based. I avoided caffeine, alcohol. But what he did, I had always been trying to put all these supplements in my body, and I never thought of this elegant solution of what I could take out of my body. So he took me off all medications, all supplements, and he had me employing some simple things like activated charcoal to reduce the effects of all of these medications I had taken for so long. So I had a very simple diet, and then he put me on short dry fasts. So I did a 1-day dry fast. I did a 3-day dry fast at home before I went to Siberia. And I'd already been juice fasting, water fasting, really since I was a teenager. So I was no stranger to that process. So I did his preparation before I spent 2 months in Siberia with him.
And those 2 months.
And those 2 months with him saved my life.
Yeah. What was the longest dry fast that you did?
The longest dry fast that I did when I was very sick, because I now do maintenance dry fast, not for Lyme disease, but because he counsels all of it. He says it's a toxic world.
Yeah.
All of people should be dry fasting. Everyone should be dry fasting. So the longest one I did when I was sick there with him was 9 days. And
Wow.
the important thing about it, so I first did a 7-day, and then he rehabilitated me with the exit. And it's very important, of course, not to overdo it in the exit. And then And then we did the longer 9-day. And what he says, it's, you can't cure a disease with a 2 or 3 day dry fast. It has to be cumulative days. Those cumulative days, the body is working up to this, really powerful mechanism of sorting through the cells. The organs are resting, the healthy cells are preserved, but it's going through this really sophisticated process and it takes time. So he says the 9th day is the most important day. So you have to make it to the 9th day with no food and no water, which I was able to do.
Yeah. Huh. Amazing. So you were accustomed to doing fasting when just growing up or whatever before you got sick. 9 days. Could you have done 20 because you were so sick?
No, no, I want to be very clear to the listeners out there that there are social media accounts circulating in the US about these long 20-day dry fasts. This is very dangerous and the human body should not undergo ever more than 11 days. And Dr. Filonov would never allow a patient to go past 11 days. What he would do instead would be to do a 7-day dry fast, then a 9-day, take a few weeks off and do another 9-day. And that's the safe way to practice this. And he has been using these treatments for 30 years. So he observes the patient. This patient is under medical supervision. He would never approve of a 20-day dry fast. So I'm so glad that you asked that question.
And I just pulled the number out of the air. I've never heard of a dry fast before our conversation today. It was more from my perspective of would you have done anything to get better
I would have.
from a psychological standpoint?
If I knew that it was safe, and I did put a lot of trust in him because I could tell he's very wise, he's very logical, he's very rational, and I can see that he makes very careful decisions with his patients. And so I did put myself in his hands. And I thought, none of these symptoms I have while dry fasting, a little bit of thirst, a little bit of fatigue, it's nothing is worse than my Lyme symptoms. And I was so motivated to get better. And surprisingly, I felt increasingly better as I kept dry fasting. It was like my body was burning off this junk, so to speak, in vernacular. And I felt better as the days progressed while I was still dry fasting, which to me was miraculous.
Yeah.
And when I came out of it, I really felt like I had been put back into my 17-year-old body. I was just like bouncing, and my memory, I had no idea that these things would come back. And, I went on to write 4 books in the last 5 years. There's, in the process of coming out. This is the first one to come out. But I spent the whole summer this year hiking through the Swiss Alps with my daughter, and I'm running every day, and I have this really high energy like I used to have. So that to me is the reason why I need to put this out there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's incredible, and I'm so happy that it worked, obviously,
Thank
and
you.
and that you've got your life back. So
Yes, thank you. I'm
amazing.
grateful for that every single day.
So when people pick up the book and read it, what are you hoping that they'll get out of it?
Well, I want them to understand that there's hope if you're in despair. I want them to see it's also a sort of a love letter to life itself. It's not just staying in despair, it's really lifting up and finding your path to wellness. It's so, and then I include very detailed protocols that I discussed with Dr. Filonov, even recipes, and I used a lot of meditations while I was dry fasting just to keep calm during that process. So I include those in an appendix. And even for if someone is not ill, I think that it's an inspiring story and that we can all improve our health. And the world does present a lot of challenges with pollution and just the toxins that we encounter living in, living in cities. And so what my doctor, is always stating is that this process is for everyone. And, the people who I have seen, who've seen me and then decided to dry fast, have just felt marvelous. And so I would like people to have access to that.
I love it. Yeah, it's so true that our lifestyles today and all the different environmental factors that are so dangerous for our bodies, let alone all the crap that we put into our bodies and the things that are self-inflicted. So the more that we can do to position our bodies to be healthy, the better. So makes sense. Well,
Absolutely.
Michelle, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you, and where can they pick up a copy of Starving to Heal in Siberia?
Thank you so much, George. So, Starving to Heal in Siberia is sold where books are sold. It's also available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of the different web booksellers. I do have a website, michelleslater.com, and some social media accounts. I think there's a Michelle Slater New York on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. So I may be found there. I've also written a blog. I wanted to point out for your listeners who might have Lyme disease or other illnesses that there is an audiobook available. I really wanted that to be out there because people who are ill can't just sit down and read a whole book. So I wanted to have the audiobook available. That is available now. So there.
Awesome. Well, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, show Michelle your appreciation and share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Pick up a copy of Starving to Heal in Siberia wherever you buy your books. And also keep in mind that the audiobook is also available. And then go to michelleslater.com. It's MICHELLESLATER to find the blog as well. Thanks again, Michelle.
Thank you, George.
And until next time, remember, do your part by doing your best.